It's been too long since we last got some My Hero Academia content, and it's still a while away until we get that final season. Luckily for us though, in the meantime, we have the debut of a new show, the anime adaptation of My Hero Academia's spin-off series, Vigilantes, which obviously follows vigilante characters. Not gonna lie, I haven't read this at all, so unlike the original, we're flying blind. I'm actually really excited. Nothing else for it but to jump straight in, I guess. We start off with a cold open that pretty much summarizes what we know from the original show. Over time, Earth became a superhuman society where the majority of the world had developed some sort of quirk that gave them supernatural abilities. As society came to grips with this new status quo, heroes rose up with the support of the government to protect people using their quirks. At the same time though, a different type of hero would also emerge. Those who operate outside the law and have their own moral code. Not mandated by the government and technically criminals due to their own actions, these people were branded vigilantes. At the same time as we're getting this exposition, we get a closer look at the three protagonists of the show. And we also learn that this is going to be set long before the events of the original show and Deku's era of heroism. We then jump into the intro theme, and it is suitably awesome. This is how it always goes for me though. The first theme, I always love it, and then I get salty when they swap it, only to eventually come to love the next one, just before it gets replaced as well. So I'll enjoy this while it lasts. I don't know much about the story, so this was cool to watch the intro and see what we're going to get here. Of note, there was a couple of the grown heroes from the classic series. All Might, Midnight, the original Ingenium were the big ones that I noticed, but I also saw the detective guy and the cat police officer too, so it should be fun. The episode then begins, and first up, we have a fine burst of nostalgia. We get to see Prime All Might strutting his stuff. Well, almost Prime All Might. I think this show's set just after the fight that wrecked both him and All For One, but All Might is clearly recovered enough to resume hero work, and he probably doesn't have the severe limits that he had by the time that he met Deku. Anyway, he's an absolute stud, leaping off a building to defeat a villain who looks like an angry thumb with one smash. It was fun to see Muscle All Might again after so long of pure Small Might in the main series. Getting his theme tune too, just excellent. Of course the crowd goes wild, and why wouldn't they? He swooped in for the instant KO. He picks this dude up and leaps away. This would be epic. Here's where we meet our lead character Koichi, who's a college student who seems to be an All Might fan. Although that being said, I think it would be rare to find somebody who wasn't an All Might fan in this world. Dude's next level in terms of power and charisma after all. Late for class, Koichi runs without looking where he's going, ducking into an alleyway as a shortcut and bumping into a group of thugs. Since these guys are dicks, they decide to make trouble and intentionally pour out their drink as an excuse to get physical with him. It was refreshing to see that Koichi isn't just some Chad who's ready to throw down with the thugs though. He instantly bows down and begs for mercy, and only uses his quirk to escape when he feels a kick coming, which pisses off the thugs and means that he actually has to haul his ass out of there pronto. Another thing that I enjoyed is that his quirk, whilst actually decent for a normal life, seems to rather suck for being a vigilante, and people actively look down on him for it. Essentially, he can slip and slide on any surface so long as he has 3 points of contact. It's slightly faster than running, but it's not like he has a proper super speed. This means we're going from Deku, who's a hero that has a busted quirk that can pretty much do anything and beat anybody, to this guy, who has a very middling quirk. I'm sure that it's going to improve over time and he will be able to go faster, but it'll likely never get to the point where he's able to just run through any villain with ease. I think that's good though, because it ups the stakes and ensures the fights are going to be more tactical. It's like those early days of Deku where he had to conserve himself because otherwise he'd just shatter his bones. We cut forward to later in the day where he stumbles across underground idol Pop Step doing a guerrilla performance. Not really much to say here other than this is a way to introduce the character before the big dramatic sequence later on. There's no real interaction and she's just singing and dancing. He ends up late to his job working in a convenience store where the 3 thugs from earlier appear, still really mad that he'd done a runner. They really must have nothing going on in their lives that they're still angry about that. So they drag him out into an alleyway and they kick the absolute shit out of him. And so he has to walk home battered and bruised. Here the episode does something really quite funny. It has him reflect on the injustice of the world, that the cops don't do anything to stop these type of thugs, and thus he has to step up. He's going to use his quirk no matter what the law says. Simply from the context of what the show's about, this leads you to think that maybe this is going to be the moment. He's going to suit up and take the fight to those bullies as a vigilante. Except that's not what happens. Instead, he moonlights as a local friendly helper of the common man, Nice Guy, wearing an All Might hoodie and a mask. He picks up dropped phones, he gives directions and helps people figure out how to get home. He takes group photos for people and throws out their trash. People seem to love their little neighborhood helper, and it gives him joy. It's a very funny sequence. And also one that's very wholesome. It ensures you're riding a high that can be shattered in the very next scene. Koichi walks down an alleyway and encounters Popstep again, who pretty much just makes fun of him but also gives him a soft drink. All well and good, except then they run into the thugs from earlier. Man, he's just unlucky the third time. And this was a deeply uncomfortable scene. The dudes pin Popstep to a wall and notice she's dressed a bit provocatively, as after all, she's an aspiring idol and she was performing for her fans earlier. They then declare they're going to unmask her and post her online, all while leering at her and grabbing at her face. All in all, it's pretty clear there was going to be some insidiousness going down. That being said, I've seen a lot of hate towards Koichi for being a coward and trying to walk away at first. Yeah, I guess I can see it, but I think the idea is that this dude isn't supposed to be some superhero. He's legitimately just a regular person. He knows he can't fight, he's scared, and these guys have already beaten him up once before that very same day. He knows that guy has claw quirks, and he could die. So he briefly walks away, only to notice her crying, and he has this jump into action moment. I realize it's not exactly the best way to introduce your main protagonist if we're being honest, as on social media it's made so many people so angry, calling him a coward and giving him a negative comparison to Deku, but at the same time I think that's the point. Deku is by design an unrealistically brave person, to the point of being all but suicidal if you look at the things he's willing to do and how far he'll go. I think this was setting up Koichi to be a bit cowardly and meek to make him more relatable. Because if we're being honest, most people would legitimately be a bystander in that context, and you know it. Even then though, he does jump in, and what happens? He is immediately pummeled, gets his face slashed because he's utterly weak with the quirk not suited for fighting. That being said, I do think he's going to have some significant growth over the course of the show's run. Here, we get our first glimpse at our third vigilante, Knuckleduster. Immediately, cool design, channeling Daredevil in his vigilante costume, or a human version of a Ninja Turtle. Once again, some pretty funny subverted expectations in this scene. I was expecting him to be an ultra serious badass. Don't get me wrong, he's a badass, but the episode doesn't treat him seriously. He jumps off the roof to help and lands in a pile of garbage bags and then slowly struggles to get out of them. Imagine that happening to All Might or Endeavor. It would never. After that though, it's badass o'clock as he wrecks the three dudes with a single punch each. We have a twist on the famous All Might Deku, you can be a hero / body moved on its own conversation, with Knuckleduster telling Koichi that he has promise and that he can become a hero. Koichi, instead of being inspired, tries to escape and avoid this dangerous trash man that flew down from the heavens. Popstep finds herself being threatened by the lead guy again, and this time Koichi jumps in and feels that heroic pull, already showing some development, before the dude is given a traumatic brain injury by Knuckleduster. Well deserved, I have to say, well deserved. Knuckleduster decides that he's not going to be taking no for an answer, and that Koichi is going to be his apprentice. He follows him home, goes through his stuff, steals his beer, and demands that he calls him master. I have to say that once again, this guy's personality is so different to what I was expecting, but it works so well. It gives him this more unhinged vibe, and if anything, it makes him seem more dangerous. While this is going on, the three thugs out in the street come across somebody who offers them what I guess is that quirk enhancer drug from the OG series. Trigger, I think. That's what it's called, pretty sure. This guy has a scar and his face is shadowed, so I'm almost certain he's going to be some sort of main villain that'll be revealed later on. Got to introduce those characters early, I suppose, to get the heroes on the trail. Then it's back over to the new vigilante team, and yep, Knuckleduster is hunting Trigger. He confirms it, and he's roping Koichi into his scheme. His unhinged plan, as he explains crazily, is that he's going to be going out into the streets and demanding to see the tongues of any suspicious individuals. If the tongue is dark, it means they're a Trigger user, and they will cop a beat down to get them to talk about their dealer, who of course he will then beat up again. Anybody who doesn't cooperate will be beaten up. I already love this dude. He's clearly somewhat unstable, but I kind of love it. Kind of gives me grown-up Bakugo vibes, where he's just totally ready to throw down with anybody at the drop of a hat. Cutting back over to the thugs, we see them shoot up with Trigger and have their quirks go nuts. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised that by the next day, neither of our vigilantes had actually heard about what happened. It seemed like they were about to go on a rampage and do some serious damage, and the episode implies that they spent the whole next day on the hunt. That's sunset, right? Not sunrise. That evening, Popstep appears again and asks why he's hanging around with this old weirdo, with Koichi claiming that he's there to ensure that Knuckleduster doesn't attack everybody he meets. Knuckles even claims that he'd target youngsters in flashy clothes first. God, I love this guy! I would watch a show just about this dude and his unhinged adventures for sure. Of the three, he's probably the one who's jumping out the most at present. Hopefully the two others get their moments as well, because right now, it's not that they're boring, They just don't pop off the screen like he does. Popstep tries to help them narrow down the search radius for who they should be looking for, only for Knuckleduster to leave in the middle of her speech to threaten some random looking businessman, frightening him to the point that he crashes into Koichi and spills his action figures everywhere. Even then, he decides he's going to pummel him just a little bit because he's decided this dude is very suspicious. What kind of adult has toys? We go from extremely funny to extremely hype so quickly though, as a familiar bandage weapon appears and wraps around his arm as the shot cuts to a Razorhead, who just looks like he was out doing some shopping and stumbled across this scene. Of course, the episode ends before we can get some good old-fashioned brawling, but my god, I'm hyped for the next one. Really great start with this episode. Drama with Koichi in the alleyway aside, the plot has hooked me, and Knuckleduster is such a fun character that I'm pretty keen to come back for the next episode and see what happens next. Razor is so serious, and this guy is so crazy, that it should be a good time. Beyond that though, these have all been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the episode? Did you like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.